All right, welcome everybody. We'll get started and I'll just let people in as they join. Um, Welcome to Family First Wednesday. My name's Beth Ayers and I am the Executive Director of Family Peers for Hope. Um, we have June's topic is Parent to Parent USA. I am really excited. Jen Bannon from Family is going to be our presenter, and she is such an advocate, not only has her own lived experience raising children with special health care needs, but also for the family peer support workforce. Their organization does a lot of really, really great work for families across Montana. Um, and so she's going to talk a little bit about Parent to Parent USA, which is a national network that connects parents and caregivers of individuals with disabilities with trained support parents who have shared lived experience. And they have brought this program to Montana. So she's going to explain it to us and kind of share how that started. So I will turn it over to you, Jen. Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Beth.
here.
Thanks, Beth. And this is, I'm going to be talking to people who already know about peer support, and I see many faces there that I recognize. Family is really grateful for their partnership with Beth. Beth and I have been working together and talking about things for a long time, and it's been great for us to go back and forth and look at our different experiences and also our shared experiences. And we've actually been able to provide peer support to each other in a surprising way, which I love telling people that because sometimes we think, well, my kid's not like your kid, and so we've been able to do that and have a lot of great discussions. So I am going to be talking about Parent to Parent USA and introducing myself a little bit. So let me start the shared screen here. Make sure I get that right. Okay, there we go. Do you see the right mode instead of the presenter mode? Okay. And
Yes,
I'm
we're
not
good.
going to watch the chat or anything, but I'm a pretty relaxed presenter. So you can interrupt me or stop me or type in the chat. And Beth, maybe you can help me with that. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So as Beth mentioned, I'm going to talk about the Montana's Parent to Parent USA program. So as Beth said, the Parent to Parent USA is a nationwide program. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, let's see if we can get the slides to go. There we go. So I always like to acknowledge our funders first. So we receive federal funding from the Health Resources and Services Administration and additional funding from Montana Children's Special Health Services. And the materials and presentations we develop ourselves independently, and they may not always reflect the views of the state or federal agencies. This particular project was funded mostly by Children's Special Health Services through the Department of Health and Human Services. And this is my family, and many of you have already seen this slide, and I think everybody that's here today has a reason that they're here or a reason that they're interested in this type of work. And I have these are my 5 children and my 2 grandchildren and my son-in-law, and my daughter Hallie, who's in the maroon sweater, has a rare genetic diagnosis, and then my grandson Ollie, who is in the green t-shirt, has a lot of things going on with behavioral things, and he's 6, and we're not sure exactly what's going on, but we're working to try to figure that out. And so this is what got me into this work more formally, was when I needed support with Hallie and being able to meet with other parents and talk with other parents, and just realizing the power of being able to sit with someone and not say any words, and you've already been supported just by being in that same space with somebody who understands exactly how you feel. And that has been such a powerful thing for me over my life. And I felt that power when I meet with other families or other caregivers. And so that's why this work's really important to me. Just a little bit about Montana Family to Family. We're a health information center, and our mission statement is connect Montana families raising children with medical and behavioral health care needs to trusted information, resources, community supports, so they can navigate systems, make informed decisions, and thrive at every stage of their journey. And there's one in every state and territory and on some reservations. So if you move into another state or know someone in another state who needs this type of help, there's a Montana family to family everywhere. They have different names and they all look slightly differently because our states all have different needs. One of the things I talk about in Montana is like we have a really long wait list for our waiver. Our developmental disabilities waiver. Some states have a wait list that's twice as long as ours, and some states don't have a wait list at all. So in the states where there's not a wait list at all, those centers don't work as hard with families to solve waiver issues and those types of issues. And then in other states, the waiver is a huge issue. They're always staffed by families of children with medical and behavioral health care needs or individuals with disabilities or other caregivers. I use the term families really loosely as that group of people that's involved in that care and helping with that child. And we provide free family-centered support to families, professionals, agencies, providers, adults with disabilities, anybody that gives us a call. So I'm going to talk more specifically about one of our newest programs, which is Parent to Parent USA. And their mission is to support a national network of parent to parent programs to ensure access to quality emotional support for families of individuals with disabilities and or special healthcare needs. And they're most of, like I said, this information probably will not be surprising information to you that have been working in peer programs. So their core values are that each family's journey has value and can offer hope and inspiration to others. Peer support fosters mutual growth and resilience in families and among programs, which I think that's what we've been doing, Beth, right? The two of us together, working with our programs and growing together. It's evidence-based practices to try to make sure that there's that consistency and quality throughout the network. So they use evidence-based practices in terms of how quickly to reach out to somebody, how many contacts should be done in a certain amount of time, and then leadership integrity and partnership build capacity and sustainability. The first formally organized parent-to-parent program was a pilot program that was started in Omaha and Nebraska. And like many other parent or family-grown programs, these were parents who got together, realized that they maybe needed a more formal way to find each other. So they offered a unique form of assistance that wasn't typically met by the formal service system, and is still not typically met by the formal service system, but like the Family Peers for Hope and those types of trainings are bringing that more into the formal systems. So the program grew rapidly within the first few years, and the founders received a federal grant to train others to replicate their pilot model. So then parent-to-parent programs started springing up nationwide, fueled by that energy and commitment of parents who believed in how important they were, because all of us that have experienced that, not just in our own families, but even when you need directions to get somewhere and someone who's been there tells you how to get there and all the secrets of how to get in and all those things, all of us feel more connected to our communities and when we have those opportunities. So I'm going to share this video. This is the first time I've embedded a video in a PowerPoint. So we'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, I'll make a new plan. So just if you can give me a thumbs up or down once we get started, that would be great. Okay. So I probably need to turn on a sound thing, right? Is there anybody who feels like they have more experience than I do with that? Share computer sound. Let's try that.
We're all parents here at Parent of USA. I think that's really important because we all have children with special health care needs or disabilities, and we understand the journey. When you're a parent of a child with special needs, you learn that often the people you learn from the most is another parent that's been where you have been. And it just makes the journey so much easier.
One of the greatest things about being part of a national organization is the ability to be able to cross boundaries and support families.
What Parent to Parent does is build a community for families who don't have a community, and I think that's just incredibly powerful for families who don't have one.
We have over 30,000 families that are matched each year. We have well over 70,000 families getting information and referral. In addition to those matched families, we have over 9,000 volunteers.
Engagement, partnerships, diversity, and health equity. These are just a few of our initiatives to help meet the needs of our parent-to-parent families.
After 40 years of the disability world evolving, the one thing that remains constant is the need for emotional support. And there's so many people out there that don't legitimize parents' emotional needs in raising children with disabilities.
All of us in Parent to Parent USA have something in common, and that is a passion for peer support.
Thank you. That actually worked, and I learned the sound trick. Oh, now we'll go to the next. So this is right now where there's parent-to-parent USA organizations in the United States. And of course, there's this middle Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, South Dakota area where there hasn't been a parent-to-parent. And Parent-to-Parent USA has been working for a long time to try to find an organization in Montana. And they had originally started some relationships with PLEC, which was Parents Let's Unite for Kids, which was a long-standing family organization in Montana. And then that picture that you saw, I'm actually in that picture. Right when I became director at the F2F, I went to their parent training because it was one of the first ones that was offered. But it took until last November for the family to family to sign up with them. So I had been able to attend some of their trainings. But one of the really great things about being part of the bigger group is that we have a national referral page that we can go to if we have a family that comes to us with a rare diagnosis who wants somebody with that exact diagnosis, which is just one way to match people. We can go onto that broader page and say Montana's looking for a parent. And in fact, I was matched over the last 6 months with a grandparent who had recently gotten custody of a child that had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, which is the same syndrome that my daughter has. And so it makes for a broader, especially for a state like Montana, where we have lots of people with rare diagnoses, but they don't all have the same rare diagnosis. So it's hard to find someone, especially with this particular diagnosis, or sometimes a particular situation, depending on your need. So as I mentioned, Parent to Parent uses research and evidence-based peer support, and they've just started a new initiative related to research to try to help in twofold. One, to do research with the current parent-to-parent programs they have, and then bring that research to people who are interested in funding peer programs and present like, this is what we found and this is how it's helping families. And I've been working on the research committee, and it's actually been really interesting to figure out what it is we don't know yet about why matches work. One of the things we're talking about right now is is texting and messaging, is it as good as or different than face-to-face or Zooming? And for some families, is it better or different? And so that's one of the things there hasn't been a lot of information collected on. And so we've got this network now of peer-to-peer where we can go to them and say, what are you hearing back from families or the peer matches about how that's working? So as I mentioned, they connect parents of children and adults with developmental or physical disabilities with other experienced trained parents who can support them in the journey. And I'm going to use that word trained parents or trained volunteers. They also have resource parents or resource volunteers. And that's somebody who maybe hasn't had the training, but you know that they have a child with a similar situation and they would still be a good, helpful match for someone. So we don't want people to go unmatched because we don't have the right person or an untrained person. So we talk about those families as resource families or resource parents. So parents are carefully matched in one-to-one relationships to receive a unique form of support that can't come from any other source. And we do get dads that ask for matches and moms. And we've had a couple come across lately where like there was a mom and a dad that were looking for a match with another mom and dad. And then yesterday there was someone who has recently started taking care of their sibling who was looking for to be matched with another sibling who had recently started doing care for their own sibling. And again, I'm giving you guys information you already know. Providing and or ensuring formal and informal support through peer-to-peer support for the child and family during each phase of the child's life is one of AAP's core principles of patient and family-centered care. That's why I think all of us here today are passionate about it. We've experienced it, but we also know that it's evidence-based. So when we have parents that receive support from other parents, it increases confidence and well-being, increases problem-solving capacity and adaptive coping, self-esteem, acceptance of your family situation, reduces stress, anxiety, and depression, and can provide empowerment for caring for your child. And I'm sorry, this slide is probably a little bit blurry for you all, but this just talks about the most frequent diagnosis, which are probably not that different than what a lot of us are hearing. Autism spectrum diagnosis, intellectual developmental disabilities, genetic conditions, emotional mental health, and then the ages of the children really, really vary. And of course, this is always just a snapshot, right? Because these kids get older. And I've actually heard from one parent to parent that now they have somebody who was a child. So their parent called to get parent support. And now that child is providing parent support to other parents. So the child grew up, saw the value of what that did for their family, and then wanted to provide support to other parents. So these kids grow up, but we have a lot that are in that younger age, and then that middle school to high school range too. And then we've had people reach out. They try to collect that racial and ethnic data, which is a little hard to get, but you can see by the different color hearts that they've had more people who are white or Caucasian reach out. And right now they're also doing an initiative to try to figure out like what is going on with that, which I think is something that we're all trying to figure out. Um, how do we get families involved in our programs, or get families to, how do we bring our program to families so that they can find those peers, and what are we doing or not doing that might bring in those other the other families that aren't represented, or for example, dads, which is another group that is not always represented. Connecting parents seeking emotional support with trained, experienced volunteers. And again, that's that trained, experienced volunteers. And I'm going to talk a little more about the training. I'm not sure for which year this information is from, but they work really hard to have that first contact back be within the first 48 hours. And 38% of the time that's been happening. But we've also been talking about like the grandma that I matched with, when I reached out to her, she had a crisis in her family. Then she reached back out to me and we set an appointment. And then I'm a parent, so I had a crisis in my family. And then, so we actually didn't connect within the first 48 hours. And I think within the first 6 weeks, we actually were not able to have a back and forth at all. And then we finally had an awesome back and forth that served her needs fabulously, but it didn't fall within the framework of evidence-based best practices, which was a really good experience for me, because I think she and I would have both reported it as exactly what we needed when we needed it. And so that's one of the things that they're looking at. Is it sometimes when you don't get back to each other, it's because you're living that life that makes you need that support. And so is that amount of time, nobody's sitting for the 48 hours hoping for waiting. But some of us want, when we get that first call, for someone to be there. So we've been talking about that. And then this 107 interstate matches, I think, is probably a low number for what I've been seeing with the back and forth on the national stuff. So this is about our path, which I already kind of alluded to. So I've been attending the national parent-to-parent conferences and trainings over the past 6 years. Even before I knew exactly what it was just one of the first conferences that was available when I first started working at this job. And then at the end of last year, we applied to be Montana's parent-to-parent. Each state has one parent-to-parent affiliated organization. And then we were able to pay the fee and do our training. Montana Children's Special Health Services provided the training fee. And then all of our staff were trained last year by Parent to Parent USA. And I'll show you a little bit more what the trainings are about. And so now this is the step that we're in right now, because they want you to set up your program so that you're ready to go. So you've got volunteers that need trained, you need to recruit volunteers, you need someone to oversee the matches, you need to find the families that would like that type of match, and might want to talk back and forth with a family over a couple months rather than just what's the phone number for this or what's that. So we're at the spot right now where over this summer, we're going to work on setting up the infrastructure for what it's going to look like within our staff. Then we can start recruiting caregivers and provide trainings. And then we can start matching and overseeing the matches. And then we continue to receive support and training from Parent to Parent USA. And then we have the access to national matching for unique situations. One of the things that I've been struggling with or thinking about is the whole idea about volunteer parents, because I'm a big fan of wanting there to, we have worked really hard to learn to know all the things that we know. And I don't think that we should always be asked to just provide everything we know all the time. And that's why, if someone doesn't have the time or capacity, but I've been trying to think about what to do with the volunteers, because I would like there to be a little bit more in that for them, for the time that they take to do the trainings, to be a trained volunteer, and also just that respect for everything that we know. And that's really important to me. So I'm still thinking a little bit about that. So when you look at like what qualities, and again, I'm talking to a group of people already knows this, when you're looking for somebody to match with other families, you want someone that has, acceptance of their own child's needs and adjustments to the family situation, which of course fluctuates. So sometimes I'm in acceptance, sometimes I'm not in acceptance. So I want to be clear that these are not singular, snapshots, the ability and experience, and I would say also the desire to want to reach out and provide support to other parents. That's not something that everybody wants to do. Being able to cope with other people's problems and tolerance for different values and feelings that might not be the same as yours, willingness to share your story, communication skills, empathy, being able to keep confidentiality, having time available, and then also knowing when to say no. Because just because maybe you get matched with somebody that might not be a good match for you, or partway through, you might not have the time to do that anymore. And so it's really important with this program that we make sure we're looking at the needs of the families that we're serving, and then also the families that have been trained to do the matches. I'm not going to read out all of these, but this is some of the training topics that we went through. Some of the things I've already shared with you, like introduction to parent, what is a peer support parent? What is peer support? What's not? Different ways of talking. We've done trainings around motivational interviewing and different types of ways to communicate with families, and then all the different ways we communicate with families. Like I was just saying, like texting, like asking that question, like how do we text emotion, right? How do we get emotion out in texting and messaging, and make sure that we're doing that in a way that feels supportive. And then again, all the support is, family centered. And then talking about peer matching. And, we've had to think about like, how do we talk to families about what type of match are you looking for? Because some people, it might be, I want a parent that's the same age as me. And that might be more important than my child's diagnosis. Or I want to talk to somebody who lives really far from resources. Or I want to talk to somebody. So it's not just based on one thing or two things. And sometimes when you know the parents that you have who want to be peer support or peer parents in that way, somebody that might be a good match, even though they maybe don't have the things on common in paper. And I think again, back to, like the conversations you and I've had, Beth, where we've been like, oh, that was great support we just provided each other. But on paper, we realize that there's not that many things where people might match us up. And so just, knowing your parents on both sides and being able to figure that out. So train support parents and families. There's forms that you can complete, and that's another thing we've been going through. Some of them are really, really long and ask every single question about every single thing. And that seems like a lot for people to fill out. And so we're trying to think, what are the most important things that we need to ask? Talking about different experiences and needs, interests, and preferences. And then that information helps us determine the matches. And then the trained caregivers can decide whether or not they want to participate in a match. And then, like I said, the matches are based on a number of things. And then there's a check-in throughout the process to provide support and help to make sure that the match is a good match, and that people still have the time and capacity to do it. Either person can choose to end the match, and matches can communicate in the way that works best for them. And then the trained support parents report that data back to us. And then we survey the caregivers anonymously to see how this is how it should work in theory. So I talked a little bit about the best practices, and this is the best practices timeline that Parent to Parent has been using. And so I told you that the match I had did not meet any of this criteria, but I know that that person felt very good about the information she got from me, and she got it from me at the time that she could take it in and the time that worked for me. And so obviously some people, it may have a more urgent need, and some people it's okay if it takes 8 to 12 weeks to get the information. So they like to have that first contact within, 24 to 48 hours, and then get that connection, follow up within the week, and then have 4 contacts over the first 8 weeks, and then reevaluate at 8 weeks. And so, like I said, we've been looking at this information and saying, like, is this really true? Is it a contact if I text you and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm here, when can we get together and talk? And if you don't text me back, then is that the support you needed right then? And maybe it is, just to know that there's someone out there who is going to be there to talk with you when you can get that time set up. So it's been really fun to talk about this, about how this has been working. So This is just a different visual about how things would work. And so trained support parents and resource parents are the two types of situations that we'll have. And resource parents, like I said, are parents who maybe haven't been through the training, but have a lot of experience in the area that that family is looking for. And that can especially happen um, with a diagnosis specific train or diagnosis specific match. And then these are some of the other programs that we have, and we've presented on others of these here. And if you have any questions about those, obviously anybody can reach out to me or to Beth. She knows how to hook us together. And then this is our contact information, our website, and our Facebook information. And that is what I have for presenting. So if there's any questions or anything that people want to add, let's see, did I get the share off of there? Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Jen. Does anybody have any questions?
This is the peer support. I have the experts here today, so. Or any comments too. I'd be curious, some of those things, like I said, we've been thinking about how do we do this? What should it look like in Montana? So if anybody else has suggestions or ideas, I would be open to those too as we're getting ready to create the audio.
Jen, I have a question. My name is Brent Morris.
Hi.
Do you utilize Beth's training for your volunteers and yourself? And will you use that in the future?
That's a great question. So Beth and I have talked about that a lot. There's a financial barrier to be able to do that. In a perfect world, that is exactly what I would do. And Beth and I have tried to figure out how to do that for all of our staff. The type of peer support that we provide right now we're not set up to do any type of billing, and everything that we provide is free. And so the training, while it would be very helpful for the information that's provided there, it wouldn't give us a way to like make more money or whatever. So, or to bill out. Now, eventually, I think we've talked, especially when the family training becomes a billable thing, that might be a better thing. But yeah, I wish we could.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off that, Brent. So through the Parent to Parent USA, though, they have training for this. So when you go out to get caregivers to become trained, do they have to go through the Parent to Parent training, or do they just have to do some sort of training?
It will be the training that we design for them. So it will include those components that I listed there, like the basic components of like confidential, like, well, they're the same, they're pretty much the same because a lot of those come from the Federation. So they're pretty much in line with those types of things. The training is just for having as many as many volunteer parents as you would need to run a program of this size. It would not be cost effective to do a training as large as the training that Beth's program has created. So does that answer your question, Brent?
Enter audio and mute. It does.
Okay.
I'd like to, whatever I can do and we can do as a state to help move the needle so you can get some funding or some collaboration to have the funding training available for you. That'd be nice.
Yeah, it's interesting, Beth, in light of what we were just talking about, like an introductory type of training to have that cohesiveness, but it's because we don't have to be licensed or certified to do, because we're not billing out. So, but to have that cohesiveness to make sure that, and so Brent, all of the people at Family to Family, we've all done trainings, national trainings. We're part of a larger group called Family Voices. And so we've all done trainings to provide peer support. They're not to the level of what Beth's organization provides, but we all do trainings so that we can take care of ourselves and the people that reach out to us.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question with that. So does Parent to Parent have the training, or are you guys doing the training?
So their thing is train the trainer is the way their program works. So now that they've trained us, we would provide a training similar to what they've provided us to our parents. But because I think Montana has different needs, our training is not going to look the same. And I also think communication is such an important piece, and knowing yourself. And so those are two really things that are important to me. But I've been looking at the different types of topics, which that's why it would be great if there were some breakout topics, right, Beth, from your guys' training that could be taught in a singular like breakout for like, I don't know, like ethics. Like that's what
Right,
I have some
right.
trainings we can do around that. But so I try to use other trainings rather than myself being the expert on like, I don't do the training on motivational interviewing at all. We either find an organization that does that in a less expensive way for nonprofits, or we join another organization or go to a conference where we can do that. So I usually try to tack other trainings rather than, because I'm not the expert in any of those fields. So we access other trainings that we have access to.
How long is the training for parent to parent to be a trained caregiver parent?
So that's going to depend again from state to state, right? And what states determine
Okay.
as training. So we did, I think we ended up doing 8 hours of, was it like maybe 8 to 10 hours of like this type of training. And then we did some training past that on trauma-based interactions and some things like that. Because there's other topics I think are important for our state and for who we bring in. And then there would be updated trainings each year. And there's Nevada has actually created a training through their university that they've been using for all of their peer people. And so we may jump into that one because it's an online training completely. So someone could do it asynchronously, which is the other problem. Like we've talked about, Beth, if we're all caring for people with a lot of things going on, it's really hard to take the time or to take a whole bunch of hours to do a training, especially if you're volunteering to do something. So, and Brent, it might be helpful to know that most of what we do is helping connect families to resources and navigating those resources and providing like the emotional support in the way that people who have a shared experience provide it, rather than providing trained, like very well trained emotional support. That's not one of the goals of our program as much as getting. So I would more want to connect people to Beth. Like if I had somebody that was in need of that level, a peer that had that level of peer support, I would connect them to another organization after we provided that in between. Like, here we are, let's get you started. Here's a resource. Here's a parent who's had a similar experience. Okay, you need more than what our organization is set up to do. And then our goal is to connect them to those organizations and help them navigate those organizations rather than that we're going to provide all of that.
Because mostly the peer support that Beth is working with, it could be like a 2 or 3. As far as like someone else that I know that does this for a living, their caseload, they're essentially like a case manager for 2 to 3 months. That's not our genre. That's not what we do. But absolutely, do parents reach out to me for, it could be a year that they're reaching out to say, hey, I have a question about this. I have a question about this. But I'm not a case manager and even though I do have some families that reach out to me quite often, I am not continuously doing a case management situation with them.
Yeah, so it looks a little different, Brent, because we'll have families call us with one thing, and then in 6 months, it's a different type of thing. And sometimes they need 3 or 4 conversations about the same thing, or sometimes they're just like, what's the name of the person? Who was the guy at the meeting that talked about? And so a lot of what we're doing is connecting families to other resources and then making sure they can navigate those and that they get connected rather than giving a phone number and then they don't get connected. So yeah, so we're kind of go ahead.
Well, no, this is great. Thank you. And I know it could work together and stuff, and it will. And I worked in a similar relationship with adult peer support as what's now certified peer.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked in the same kind of like you're doing under different roles versus, and the certification came in Montana.
Mm-hmm.
So I very relate to it.
Thank you. Those are great questions.
I think what I really like about Circle of Parents also is that the matching is it's varied. It's not cut and dry. It's not a specific diagnosis. It's just more of, it's a variety, and the person asking for the connection gets to guide it versus us saying, oh, it's diagnosis. You know what I mean? Like it's varied. So when we went through the training, I was very excited about that because I could see in the future a person saying, that's not, that diagnosis isn't as important as this particular topic is, or this. So that was really important to me too.
Yeah, like transition. Like I have yeah, I always get the one about girls. I have a daughter entering puberty and I need to know what to do. And that's like they're looking for any parent any mom who wants to talk through disabilities, and that, because the other thing with that too is that like if the match isn't a good match, we can switch it up, which is something. So it's not because we're not an organization that has one person that's hired or has to do something that's billable. We have that flexibility to do a little bit more of switching or to do targeted training. So that's one of the other things, as we've seen, things that I felt like, oh, we need to learn more about this, like the trauma-informed language has become more important to me over time. And I'm like, oh, we need to learn more about that. And so then I'm able to be like, that's a gap that we have. Let's learn about that. And so I think that's some places I think, Beth, where we could do some more partnering, with some things like that, because I think we have a lot of our peer supporters have shared interest in, improving their skills in those areas.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if those sort of trainings are open to anyone or just your trained parents and caregivers.
No, yeah, no, that would be that would be a really great place to partner. That's exciting to think about that in between space where we all exist.
Yeah, because with certification or just any person doing peer support, that continuing ed is so important. And then when you are certified, you have to have certified, or you have to have continuing ed. So yeah, it's definitely. So where are you guys at in this process? So you've trained your people that work for family to family, and then are you gonna go out and search for parents, caregivers to become trained? Is that kind of the
I'm going to
next
figure out the
step?
training. First, I'm going to figure out the training and how we can access that, and how we can try to make it worthwhile for families and parents, right? So what types of trainings are helpful to somebody who wants to be a peer supporter, but also is helpful in their own life, like conflict management, or how to talk through disagreements, or learning about your own biases, like some of those kinds of things. So finding things that people would want to learn more about and will also help them be a better peer supporter. And then of course there's a vetting, it's a small vetting process, but you can tell when people are ready to match, I think sometimes just by talking to parents. So some people might want to help people, but they might not be quite ready. And so there's a responsibility there also. And so we need to figure out what our setup is going to look like, and then what that space is going to look like. Because we have parents who we have parents we've been using as resource parents. We have a couple of parents that when I've seen some things on the national thing, I've been like, oh, I know somebody in Montana who can help with that, but they're not trained. And so then that's like, this is a resource parent who can provide you some resources, rather than that this is a trained, I don't think we would say trained peer support. I think we would say like trained volunteer. So I think the language, because I know that's another thing that can be confusing. No, but it is confusing, right?
No,
People will call us and ask if we're licensed or
confusing.
certified or whatever. And we're like, so we've been talking about like, how do we answer that question, right? And explain the importance of licensure and certification, and like where people can find that when they're looking for it, and how what we do is different than that, but still serves a purpose in the whole circular peer support world.
Yeah, I don't know that parent supporters, peer supporters will ever all come under the same name. You have advocates and you have parent partners and you have,
And I can send the slides. I'll send the slides, Beth. Sorry, didn't mean to.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. Other questions for Jen?
I'm just glad that Brent was able to see it.
Well, and Brent, you and I are on another group together, I think. I'm not sure which one, but my maiden name is Morris. And so I'm like, I've seen you on, but it may have just been these type of things. So go ahead, Kim, did you have
I did. I had a quick question that you probably already covered, and it just didn't sink into my head. So when you mentioned that the peer support, the match can happen based on what's important to that family, to that person who is seeking the peer support, and it might not be around diagnosis, it might be around something else. So how do you keep track of if I'm a peer supporter who is willing to be out there and be matched with families, how are you going to keep track of all the different things that I would be interested or able to help with, so that when that person calls, it doesn't just become a match of diagnosis? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. Well, and this is where those long forms that they originally sent us come in. But the long forms were so long. Like, for example, what types of therapies has your child had? And it was like everything from therapies we've never heard of to like to therapies that you might not recommend for anyone to try. And it was like, fill those out. And so that's one of the things we need to figure out internally, Kim, is how to have us, and we might be able to use Salesforce or a different database to keep track of that. So then if somebody says like, I'm interested in transition, or I'm interested in puberty, or I'm looking, or I'm willing to talk about these things, so then we can search that up and make that match. And part of that is the volunteer coordinator understanding who the volunteers are and what kind of things, because I think also as caregivers, we sometimes undersell ourselves. And so we don't write down that we actually have experience with X, Y, and Z because it feels so part of our life. Like that's just what I do every day. And so sometimes the coordinator, I think, sees things like, well, wait a minute, they just went through that same experience. And so it's like, would you be willing to talk about that experience with a family? We had a family that called in. So I think that it's going to be figuring out if we're going to do that in our database, which right now is Salesforce, or if we're going to use something like Excel, like what's really cumbersome. And then Nevada's using, are they using Google Sheets? Nevada has a pretty keen setup. And the Nevada coordinator is the Parent to Parent USA president right now, the acting president. So she's been very committed to setting up stuff, and she's at a university just like we are. So we may jump in and share some of the stuff. They're using Smart Sheets or something. I don't remember, but yeah, we're gonna have to sort that still. I knew I was talking to a room of experts. Pretty
Any
much.
other questions? What is your timeline for having the program kind of up and running and available?
My hope is that we can be ready to start doing trainings and recruitings in the fall. That's been my hope. And we'll just have to see how it comes together. I think we live in a very ever-changing landscape right now with funding and those kinds of things. And so I think that's my hope, is that we can have that. And then we're also hoping to bring on some staff that can do some translating and do some work in Spanish for us. Because we think there's a very large need there. And so we'll probably be bringing on some more staff to try to help facilitate some of those places where we don't have as many resources.
Awesome.
That'll
That's
take
exciting.
time. That'll take time too. The university moves a little slow.
Yeah. Any questions before we close it up?
Thanks, Beth, so much.
Yeah, well, Jen, thank you. Thanks for coming on. Thank you, yeah, just for your continued work in this and advocacy. And I think that, you know, peer support comes in so many shapes and forms and sizes, and there is never going to be too much support out there for parents and caregivers. So I love just how hard you're really working to continue to build those supports for families.
Thank you. Thank you for your continued partnership. It's been great for us to get to bounce ideas and get better understandings. You had to do a lot of work to help me understand. Beth was very patient with me. I needed some schooling. I needed some schooling, and she helped me get it, which has been great. So thank you so much, everyone. And I'll send the slides out, and Beth can share those out.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And yeah, I'll follow up with an email, and everybody have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.